Hello, welcome back to a new video, Laurel Hardy Memorabilia and Charlie Chaplin collectibles. Well, this video is going to be a little bit different. I've been doing quite a bit of research and reading and studying on this guy, on Dan Leno, the King's Jester, and the reason why that got me attracted to him, because this is the guy that inspired Stan Laurel and also Charlie Chaplin back in the very early days of the music halls. And just looking at that, you can see the likeness there of Stan Laurel, so you can see where Stan got the idea from in his future characters, and eventually as with Oliver Hardy as the Laurel and Hardy team. But about this guy, really fascinating. Now, I've got a load of notes that I've had to put down about him because he's still very sort of fresh, and I'm still learning about him, so I may be going forward in time and then coming back again with my notes because they're all a little bit mixed up, but I'm going to do the best I can and talk as much detail as I can about him. So Dan Leno, so he was a pantomime and a musical comedian or performer. So his real name is George Wilde Galvin. So he was born in London on the 20th December 1860. His parents, John and Louisa Galvin, described as comedians, voiceless. George was the youngest of 4 children. So he had John 1851, Frances Elizabeth 1852, Henry Michael 1854, Marisa Danvers, if I've pronounced that right, Galvin 1855, and Louisa May 1859. So as a youth, he was famous for his clog dancing. His father died at age 37, so when Leno was 4 years old. His mother married William Grant. He was a comedian, also performed in musicals under his stage name, William Leno. So obviously this is where Dan got his stage name from his stepfather. So Dan Leno lived in extreme poverty in the slums, very similar to Charlie Chaplin's life really in his early days, where he had pretty much very little or no money or food, and then they would travel up and down the country, literally not traveling, it was actually walking everywhere from town to town or city to city. They walked for miles with his stepfather, his mother and his siblings to perform, and sometimes they would get to these places and they would perform and it wasn't successful, and they would leave, and they would leave completely empty-handed, so they didn't have anything. So that's how hard it was back then. And then on from there. So basically, Leno was a naturally talented dancer, singer, entertainer, which he was starting to get recognised for, and it was starting to get known and picked up more. So he was praised by Charles Dickens, who watched him in the audience and told him, "Good little man, you made headway." The monarch, the king back then, was so impressed that Leno became publicly known as the King's Jester, which is also the name of his book. So that was a very famous name that he was obviously known as back then. And then, so he was also famous through winning clog dancing competitions, became clog dancer champion. So his name, Dan Leno, that he adopted in 1884, made his first performance under that name in London. So as a solo artist, he became popular during the late 1880s and 1890s, highest paid comedian in the world once he was very successful. His acts were talking about life struggles, subjects mixed with comic songs about the working class. Appeared in burlesque every year from 1888 to 1904. Drury Lane Theatre's Christmas pantomime. In later years, he suffered from alcoholism, which a lot of them did then, like Chaplin's father. He suffered with alcoholism, so it was also like a big thing back then. It was very heavy for drinking with musical comedians. He was turned down for more serious roles, dramatic or Shakespearean roles, because he was always seen as a comic performer. So in those later years, Leno behaved in an eccentric and furious way. In 1902, he suffered a mental breakdown. In early 1903, he was committed to a mental asylum, but discharged later that year after one more show. His health declined, and he died aged 43 on the 31st of October 1904. Now, I've got these postcards. These are all original postcards from 1903 1904, because they've got the old stamp marks on the back. So you've got this one is actually bookmarks. They're identical bookmarks of Dan Leno dressed up as a woman. So he's very popular for dressing up in drag. So again, very similar to Stan Laurel with the smile. And again, Stan Laurel used to dress up a lot in drag as well in his films with Oliver Hardy. And then on the back, you've got the old stamps and the old writing, and some of these are dated 1903, 1904. Nice shot there, Leno's portrait shot. Again, very similar to Stan Laurel from the early stages, where Stan Laurel's got his hair combed over with a parting and he's dressed up like that with a collar. Again, very similar shot there. Another side shot there, Dan Leno. And then another drag shot there, playing Mother Goose. So again, it's all very, very similar. And then you have this one here. So he's playing Sister Anne in that one. So just going on from that, so Dan Leno's wife, Sarah Lydia Galvin, 1886 to 1942, that she would have been married to him during those years, if I've got those dates right. So they had 6 children: Ernest George Galvin, May Lillian Galvin, John Leno, Georgiana Louise Boyce, Dan Leno Jr. So that is an old postcard of his family there. Even though it says 6 children, there's only 5 in that one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there's 5 children in that old photo shot there with Dan and his wife. So from what I remember, I think one of his children died prematurely or died when they were very young. So there's a really nice old portrait family shot there of him with his family. So again, he would dress up a lot in drag for his characters. He was very sort of popular for that, and obviously very funny at the time, which also, of what we spoke about, inspired Chaplin with Leno's tramp style clothes that he'd sometimes wear in baggy outfits, and also attracted Stan Laurel with Dan's smile and also with his hair as well. Sometimes he'd be in characters with his hair up on end, so it was uncanny. It's all very much a Stan Laurel double back then. So on billboards, he was sort of known as the talk of London, Dan Leno, champion dancer of the world, funniest of all voiceless on the playbills, the highest paid comedian in the world. Had a form of a stand-up comedy. He would perform up to 2 or 3 theatres in a single night. He was the highest paid comedian doing those particular roles. And also he'd do more than 5 or 10 minutes per show, but sometimes it'd probably be a bit longer. So he was worked very hard. So he'd go from one theatre to once he'd done that one, he'd go to the next one and perform again. So it must have been mentally and physically exhausting. Again, with his characters, he would be a shop walker or railway worker, poor people about everyday life struggles. And of course, we know that postcards were produced. It could be posted as a way to promote his popularity, such as your postcards and your old style bookmarks that were produced on him as a way to promote his popularity and his know-abouts all around the country. So in 1901, he made gramophone recordings, which was like introduced to him, which he did actually find it very difficult in the beginning. He wasn't sure if he wanted to do this, but as time went on, he adapted to it, and where he would do recordings of singing and talk of jokes as well. So he also wrote in his book. I've got to put the white gloves on now because this is where it gets a bit tricky. So in 1889, he did actually write a book by himself, which is this book. This is a really old book. This is from 1889. Now, I will put pictures on of this in more detail so you can see it all. But inside it's got all sorts of rare shots of Dan Leno. But it's basically him talking about his life, but it's also a comic background of his life as well. So he's talking in a comic way. So he's adding in a lot of humour as well. But I won't open it up too much. It's very difficult to do it this way because it's so fragile and so old. I'll put photos on afterwards in more detail. But it's a really lovely old book. So I believe this is the second edition of this book from 1889. And then just going back towards the end of his life again. So we know that he became ill in 1902. He became eccentric. A little bit more, I didn't know that he had a loss of hearing. He turned to alcohol. Moods would be swings rapidly from hysterical to subdued. And he died in the arms of his wife when at only the age of 43. So as far as we know, what I've looked into, the cause of death was general paralysis, if I pronounce that right, of the insane. Often in those days, his last years spoke of confusion, frustration, unable to hear or think articulately. Thousands of people lined the streets for over 3 miles deep at his funeral to pay their respects. So really, Dan was like a film star back in the day. He was that big. He was like the big star before Chaplin, before films, basically. So what do we have of him? We do have gramophone recordings. There's very little film footage I have seen on like YouTube, etc. But there might be more out there, little bits. But unfortunately, he didn't live long enough to see the more introduction of moving pictures of filmmaking. So he would have been in films. I do believe that he would have gone that transition from stage and into films, which is a great shame that we don't really, we won't get to see that. But you still have his recordings, his writings, and his history. So it's a great extension on from the Laurel and Hardy, as where Stan Laurel and Charlie Chaplin learnt their craft from him as well. So just a little bit extra on Dan Leno. I was able to get hold of this. This is a really old pipe, and as far as I know, it's from the 1880s or 90s, but I think it might be from like the mid 1880s. But it's a really old pipe sculpted of Dan's face and wearing one of his hats there. But it's also got on the side, his name is stamped on the side twice on either side of the pipe. I'll just see if you can see it on this side. You can see just here, you've got Dan Leno just on the side of the pipe. So it's a really, really lovely old antique item, proper old sort of museum quality piece. So it's nice to be able to hunt this item down and get a hold of that. So there it is. So there were obviously things that were promoted and made on him back in the day to promote his popularity. And then just moving right away from that, back to Laurel and Hardy, I have this. This is the Regent Cinema Haze. This is another old program I've got with advertising on the back. And this is from May 1934. Just got Sophie in the way there. Come on, out of the way. She has to get involved with everything. She can't miss out. So I have, so this old program is May 1934. I'll just take these gloves off to see if we can open this up. There we go. So we have connected to Laurel and Hardy in here. So on this page you have Jean Harlow at the top here. That was obviously shown at the time in 1934, Blonde Bombshell. And then this one here, Laurel and Hardy, Fraternally Yours, which is the UK release title of the 1933 Sons of the Desert. So it's really, really nice to have that. And I just wanted to find out exactly what that meant, because I wasn't even sure myself. But Fraternally Yours, it means you're forever bound, tied, connected to the people. It means that no matter what happens, you're pledged to others just as they are to you. So I thought that was interesting. That sounds just like Sons of the Desert. So it's obviously the UK title. So another really nice old vintage program that came out back in the day. And then just to finish off, I have this, which I just got recently. This is first edition, 1985. The Wonderful World of Film Fun, 1920 and 1962. Now, I do have several original Film Fun annuals, and they're absolutely amazing. So when I get round to it, I will look at this book. So it's another fun addition to the bookcase. And they're basically comic strips that came out back in the day as a way of also advertising, really, of the comedians back in the day, and also to talk about different films on different comedians with Howard Lloyd, Buster Keaton, etc. So it's another fun addition to have. So that's it for this video. I hope everyone's enjoyed it. It's a nice little historical insight into Dan Leno, who's a Victorian music hall comedian that inspired Stan Laurel and Charlie Chaplin. So thanks for watching, and look out for the next one soon. Bye for now.